we right away go to the first session in this paper presentation session, which is the practice of dhyana dimension. Now I would like to invite Arvind V. Iyer ji to present his paper on Prāṇāyāma in Sandhyāvandana, assistance, preparation and inspiration for mantra japa.
I'm grateful to begin the paper presentation sessions on Prāṇāyāma in Sandhyāvandana, assistance, preparation and inspiration for mantra japa. Sandhyāvandana, traditionally considered, is a ritual which is supposed to be as regular as the daily course of the sun itself. The picture you see from the opening scene of the well-known movie Adi Shankaracharya has this message that as long as Sandhyāvandana proceeds unhindered, Sanatana Dharma thrives. The ritual itself has a Vaidika mantra core drawing on Shruti. It has its specifications laid out in Smritis, and a lot of Puranic imagery has been laid on to it as well, and hence it's very fundamental to Sanatana Dharma. This is another picture from the same movie, and here we'll recognize another very familiar scene, an image as associated with Sandhyāvandana as the sun itself. This pose, which we recognize as the pose of Prāṇāyāma, is something familiar to us, not just in a very traditional setting like this, but also in a yoga class, in a park, maybe even in a fitness center. And universal as it is, it also has its roots in a tradition as ancient and as continuous as Sandhyāvandana. Prāṇāyāma we associate it with, in the popular imagination, primarily with Ashtanga Yoga. And in Sandhyāvandana, though, it is endowed with mantras. The mantra component is very much emphasized in Prāṇāyāma in the context of Sandhyāvandana. As I said, it's a key component of the Sandhya ritual, and not just once, it's a recurring item in the ritual. And here is a brief roadmap of the Sandhya ritual itself, which has several components. This is not exhaustive, it just has a few brief landmarks, but suffice it to state that Prāṇāyāma is to be performed before key steps like Sankalpa steps, which is the formal resolution for a ritual, Arghya, which is offering of water, and most importantly, it is stressed before the performance of the Gayatri Mahamantra Japa. As many as 108 mental recitations of the Gayatri mantra constitute this japa. And the Prāṇāyāma that's performed before this receives particular emphasis. And that will be the emphasis here as well. As for the ritual itself, it is learned traditionally through live instruction at a very early age. Here is another picture from Adi Shankaracharya showing the Upanayana ritual, which Professor Ramachandra Bhattji mentioned as well. Of late, as an accommodation to modernity, written manuals have been needed, and the need has been responded to as well. And a number of manuals are available as also bhashyas, an example of which you see on the screen, which is called the Sandhyāvandana Bhashya of Vedanti Sitarama Shastri from 1931, published in Samskrita. And resources like this, which help both a practitioner and also somebody studying the ritual from a philosophical perspective, they draw mainly on Smriti authorities. A word here is that the Smriti corpus of texts is something in the popular imagination not as much associated with the inner life and spoken of more in the context of civil law and marriages and inheritance and so on. But Smriti texts constitute the primary authority for guidance for Sandhyāvandana like in such literature. The yoga tradition supplies role models, we could say, even if it is not the primary authority considered here. And Pauranika imagery pervades the practice of this ritual in the present day and can be traced back to its deep origins itself. You can see the Gayatri mantra personified as a goddess, which also appears in this book cover. As for Pranayama in Sandhya, in the context of its position in Ashtanga Yoga, we have a word called attention. And this attention is an abstract noun. It's a quality meant to be cultivated. And like in the picture you see there of a guard of honor by the Indian Army, the value of attention is most embodied in a recognizable gesture, like standing at attention. So pranayama itself, which is about maintaining a certain state of breath, is also most embodied and recognized by a sequence of ritual manual actions, which are well developed in the Ashtanga Yoga tradition. And one thing about Sandhyāvandana is that you could view it as recapitulating the stages of practice in Ashtanga Yoga within the ambit of a single ritual. Here is what I mean by that. In Ashtanga Yoga, the very practice of pranayama is premised on asana. Bhagavan Patanjali says, Tasmin sati shvasa prashvasayo gati vichheda pranayama. And by Tasmin sati, he refers to that attained. And what is to be attained is asana. And which also presupposes the previous yama, niyama, do's and don'ts observances. If we look at the Sandhyāvandana guidance, it meticulously outlines the requirements of timing, of the ritual bath, and so on. So it is fair to consider that what is considered foundational in Ashtanga Yoga is a foundation not just acknowledged, but enacted on a daily basis in the Sandhyāvandana ritual. And the position of pranayama within Sandhyāvandana also is concordant with Ashtanga Yoga in one other important respect, in that pranayama lays the prerequisites for what is called antaranga sadhana in the Patanjala scheme. And here too, the more subtle aspects of mantra japa are what pranayama lays the ground for. Importantly, it also provides what we may call a frame for abhyasa in the yoga context. This is in the picture itself. It's a portrayal of Mandana Mishra shown in pranayama and sandhya pose. And this is during the debate of his life, and that is no excuse to skip the ritual, be it the Indica conference or whatever is going on. This is the ritual frame really embodying the principle of Dirghakala Nairantarya Satkara Sevito Dridabhumi, which is the yoga ideal of Abhyasa. The form of asana and pranayama in the current Sandhya text, they draw a lot on yoga texts. And speaking of the form itself, this must be familiar in that the stoppage of breath and release of breath from the nostrils is to be done by the fingers of the right hand, excluding the index and middle fingers. A certain order has been prescribed in the text. There is variation across traditions, but in principle, one thing commonly acknowledged is that the mantra portion appears in the kumbhaka stage, that is when the breath is held. The very definition from the Smritikara Manu says, Savyahritim sapranavam gayatrim shirasasaha tripathet ayada prana pranayama sauchyate. So here the definition itself makes the mantra central. And this includes the Gayatri mantra itself, which is noteworthy, accompanied by Prāṇāyāma, accompanied by Pranava, that is Om, Vyahritis and Shiras. Each of these components we will see in detail in the core portion of the talk. So the basis, the substratum of the Prāṇāyāma mantra is Om, also known as Pranava, which is given the dignity of a mantra devata, and the mantra devata is Paramatma. Om has a very central place in the Yoga Sutra as well as a signifier of Ishvara. And the Upanishadic literature is replete with its threefold nature, corresponding to three components of Om, which is a symbolism that underlies the Prāṇāyāma mantra as well. Once the Om is uttered, the next mantra component in Prāṇāyāma is the utterance of Vyahritis. Vyahritis, you see 7 names over there, which can be seen as synonymous to lokas or worlds. And the way this portion is uttered is to utter Om followed by the name of a world, which is say Om Bhuhu, in series all the way until Om Satyam. This utterance is meant to be a reiteration, a repeated reiteration comprehensively, that Om is indeed all of the worlds. Om is Bhuhu, Om is Bhuvaha, and so on. The first 3 that we see, Bhu, Bhuvaha, and Suvaha, also are traditionally seen to symbolize the entire cycle of creation, starting with creation, sustenance, and dissolution. So all of cosmos and eternity is represented within this. And this portion of utterance, which is, of course, when I say utterance, I should say all of this is mental recitation, is a reiteration that Om is indeed all the worlds. The mantra devatas here also, they represent a comprehensive listing representing the entire samuha of devatas. Finally, there is the Gayatri mantra itself that appears within the Prāṇāyāma, which here in this talk represented by only symbolically by the image. Here is yet another symbolic representation showing a Gayatri in the manifestation with the attributes of the creator Brahma, preserver Vishnu, and Shiva implementing dissolution. The mantra devata for this Gayatri is traditionally Savitra, loosely the deity of the sun. However, the guidance for Sandhyāvandana renders this deity as Jagat Prasavitra, namely the origin and sire of all the worlds that we see emerging from Om. One key aspect here is that one might say if the Prāṇāyāma is preparatory for Gayatri, why should it appear within the preparation itself? And here it can be seen as an aided japa before an independent japa, in that here there is this elaborate framing with the manual assistance and placing the mantra in a truly cosmic context. Finally, there is also the final component of the Prāṇāyāma mantra is the Gayatri Shiras, which is a statement of the nature of Brahman, verily Om, as Sat Chit Ananda. Now, how the commentators interpret this is that the statement goes Apo, Jyoti, Rasa, Amritam, Brahma, Bhuvaswaram. Apa stands for the primordial waters, which is interpreted as standing for existence or Sat. Jyoti, the light of consciousness, is interpreted as Chit, and Rasaha, the essence of experience, is interpreted to be Ananda. And those familiar with the Bhagavad Gita will recall a concordance with this verse that says, Rasoham apsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayo pranavas sarva vedeshu shabdam khe paurusham nushu. All of this is within one breath hold. And this is almost a reiteration of the entire philosophy, the understanding of the cosmos of Vedanta within one breath hold. I'll conclude with a few compelling images. Here in the Praśnopanişad, we see a way to combine the images, the central images of Sandhyāvandana, which are the breath and the sun. Prana is seen to be to the self or Atman as close as a shadow is to a person. And also the sun itself is the external prana. This way, something as intimate as the breath and as ultimate as the sun have been given such a ritual unison here. This imagery pervades the Upanishads. This is just a representative example. The indwelling prana is seen as a deity receiving a lot of Puranika emphasis and promotes a lot of worship. In speaking of the assistance, preparation, and inspiration for Gayatri Japa, I'll conclude with this verse from the Mahābhārata, which is truly inspirational for our own practice. The preparation may be for mantra japa, the assistance may be for Sandhyāvandana, but here the inspiration is truly universal, treating the prana within, established by Prāṇāyāma, worship without as the sun, as the deity indwelling, equipping us to reach the highest states of tapas. Prana dharana matrena shakyam kartum tapastvaya prano hi paramo dharma sthito deheshu dehina. The very fact of prana established within us through the act of living or ritually through pranayama is itself suffices to make us reach the state of a true dhyatra or a true meditator in a manner of speaking. And this, in the tradition itself, is so close to the state of the dhyaya itself. And with this, I would like to conclude. Om Tat Sat.
Thank you very much, Arvind ji, for that very wonderful first paper on the practical dimension of dhyana. Pranayama is a very important preparation for dhyana, because as everyone is aware, chalevate chalam chittam, nischale nischalam bhave. If we are to address a kind of work with the mind, first we have to work with the prana. So this, which has been documented in 15th century Hatha Yoga text, is already there in the practice of the Vedic Sandhyāvandana, which dates back very in very old ages. Since old ages, we have very ancient times, we have this, which has been later documented in Hatha Yoga literature. So wonderful that you brought out this very essential beginning dimension, practical dimension, that for preparing or working with the mind, it's very essential to work with the prana, which is embedded in the Hindu Vedic culture and practice tradition.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, specific pointed questions here. So thank you very much, Arvind ji.